Rule the objection. I think it relates to the fMRI unless you can tie it to some other later questioning relating specifically to criticism. I'm going to overrule it. Then page 88.
And 88 is the same issue for us, Your Honor. I think it's just in the middle of all of the fMRI discussion, and that's the relevant context that this question's being raised.
The problem I see, Your Honor, is that first of all, I don't think this is just related to fMRI, and secondly, the way they've spliced it, it goes straight into an answer without a question being asked. So there's this necessary context that's not there. And again, the question is about treatment issues or effectiveness of treatment issues. So the problem is not just one relating to fMRI, it's whether the treatment, even if she hadn't done fMRI, might be treating something other than a post-concussive syndrome or persistent symptoms of concussion. No reference to fMRI there, and I think that's necessary context for the answer that they then include.
And you're seeking page 88, line 2 through 14, and line 22 through 25? Or 22 through 25 is already there, okay.
Yeah, right. So they had that. That's the part of the answer that they include that doesn't really have that necessary context in the question that I'd like to add.
So you're seeking 2 through 14?
Yes, okay. Correct.
Mr. Sorensen?
Well, I think if you go back to the full transcript, Your Honor, and look on page 87, starting at line 20, it says the question is whether the methods that you use are reliable, which is specifically the fMRI we're talking about. And so that's the thing I'm trying to get to in this. There is significant skepticism among other experts in this case about use of fMRI to say this person has post-concussive symptoms rather than other things that were going on treating him for that. So the whole context of that, and he says himself, the questions that he's asking, the basic crux of them are the fMRI. So questions and answers there about that and criticisms about that are specifically tied to the fMRI.
And then how about the complaint that the answer beginning on line 22 is just hanging out there with no question? Are you still objecting?
Yeah,
Are you objecting to that hanging out there? I mean, I'm going to overrule the objection on 2 through 14. I think it is just a continuation of the fMRI questioning. But are you still objecting to it starting on line 22?
Yeah, if we can't have that question, and I think we should just start at the next question.
Mr. Sorensen, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think it could tie back to the question that she was asked back on 82, but we're okay to strike that in the middle if the court wants to do that.
So, it's not that I want to, I'm just wondering what the parties are agreeing to.
Okay.
Well, Judge, this is going to be an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half. I don't think that will make any difference to the jury. There's nothing wrong with what's here. He's not objecting to the content of it. It's just a lot of effort to try to go back and find this, and so I would say just leave it in. He had plenty of chance to cross-examine, and
I mean, if I may,
it doesn't do any harm to leave it in either way.
if I may, Your Honor, I mean, I understand your ruling that it's tied to fMRI questioning. It's true, but there was a lot of things that were tied that can be separated, and it can be separated that I was asking her, how do you know your treatment works? Not relating even to fMRI, right? How do you know that what you're doing, the therapy, all the stuff, the boot camp she describes, how do you know that that's not treating some other issue? And then she gives this answer, and I think that should come in. If it can't come in, it doesn't make sense to me that we just leave it hanging out there and not provide the jury the benefit of what I'm trying to get at with my question.
Well, Mr. Sorensen, I think that the last part of that you're seeking to have included is also part of the same, I guess, string of questions on fMRI. And so if you want to insist on including that, then I think it makes sense for the defendants 2 through 14 to also come in.
Then we're fine letting it be stricken then, Your Honor.
Okay, so we'll strike, we'll deny 2 through 13 on page 88, or 14, and then we'll strike 22 through page 89, line 4. Anything else?
Dr. Fung, not from us.
I think
No,
that's,
So we're striking line, or 88, line 22 through 89, what line?
Line 4.
Line 4?
Correct.
Good, thank you.
And let's see, where's the bailiff? Oh, is the jury here and ready to go? Why don't you have them start getting ready? I mean, are there any other issues we need to address this morning?
So me to do it? Yeah, you do it.
I was just
You're
gonna
gonna tell me,
mention
then you help me.
one thing, if I might.
Mr. Owens, how was the transition at the end of court yesterday, at the end
Much
of the day?
better. In fact, I wanted to, any irritation I've expressed, none of that's been directed to Your Honor or your staff or the court media representative. It's been,
It's not interpreted that way, counsel.
great. I did want to know if a new AP still camera has been installed.
Where?
I'm asking,
Oh, no.
because I heard there was gonna be a new AP still camera installed directly over the lectern.
They withdrew that request.
Okay, thank you. Apparently, I want to do this transparently. This private security for my client wanted to bring in treats for the bailiffs for how helpful they've been. So I wanted to do that transparently and see if there are any objections.
We object. We object.
Okay. There's an objection, so
Okay, so I will let them know.
let them know thank you, but no thank you.
Actually, both ways, not just one way.
Well, you could bring in treats.
Well,
Okay. If the parties decide to do that later, that's fine too.
Okay.
I mean, he should have asked us first, frankly.
It hasn't been done.
I know, he should have asked us first. We could talk about it, but he just sprung it on us now, so we object.
What'd you find out about the jury? Ready to go? Okay. Is everyone ready to begin? Or 5 minutes maybe? 3 minutes? Okay.
and Your Honor, one thing that we didn't address that I think we should in terms of showing this video is, and maybe nothing that I asked to go in is in. I'm trying to recall here now.
There was one section, I think. that went in.
So I think that will need to be read because it's not on the video. So,
Yeah, if we get to that, you can just
I'm
stop.
happy to just read it if that's the best way to go forward.
I think that is the best way to go forward.
We thought we could put Mr. Norman on the stand, have him read the question, have her read the answer.
Sure, and that's on page 49.
That's fine. And if you get into a situation, Mr. Sorensen, where you can't, mute it and bring it back, you can read those portions as well.
Okay.
All right. Did you say page 49?
Because our understanding was the objection was that everything was remaining in, and they wanted it out.
On page 49? Is that what we're talking
I
about?
thought I had agreed that we could just have that in.
And I don't think, it's not out right now, is it? I thought it was in.
Yeah, that's what I mean, but we'd have to read it in.
I think it's in.
Oh, sorry, I have in and out written here, I'm confused.
It's okay. I
And
think
I
we'll
was up
just,
till 1 looking at
I
this.
think it's in,
it's in. We'll
just
just
wanted it out, he's got to mistake.
play the video. We're good.
Sorry.
We're good.
It's a 53,
And
50.
Judge, just so you know, this is about an hour and 19 seconds.
Thank you.
Now, if we need to take a break in between, that's fine, I think it's not a bad idea. So you just tell us when to take a short break if we need to, as you know.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay, please rise. For a minute recess.
The lawyers are getting ready to show you a videotaped piece of testimony, and they're just finishing their preparations for that, so we're just gonna sit and wait for just a minute. That looks much better.
My name is Len. Lance Harrison, I'm the videographer. The court reporter is Rosanne Morgan. We represent Diplomax Merit, located in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Sounds good.
The time and date indicated
How's the
on
jury?
feed is
Any trouble
1:15
hearing?
p.m.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind the volume a little higher, but when we turn the volume up there.
Does anyone need a hearing assist device? We've got those.
You know, I have a modern Surface and it's up to the
We could put a microphone by the reader.
That's not a bad idea.
yeah, do we have that external microphone? Where is it over here somewhere?
p.m. Mountain Time, March 14th, 2023. This is the case of Terry Sanderson. Versus Gwyneth Paltrow, case number 1905004.
Your Honor, may I ask where the sound is actually coming from?
One 9:15 court reporter. Okay, we're on record. My name is Lance Harrison. I'm the videographer. The court reporter is Rosanne Morgan.
Is that
We
okay?
represent Diplomax Merit, located in Salt Lake City, Utah. The time and date indicated on the Zoom feed is 1:15 p.m. Mountain Time, March 14th, 2023. This is the case of Terry Sanderson.
Your Honor, there seems to be an echo or something. Is there?
Versus Gwyneth Paltrow, case number 190500048 in the 3rd Judicial District Court of Summit County, State of Utah. Counsel will now introduce themselves and the court reporter will swear in the witness.
Lawrence Bueller for plaintiff Terry Sanderson.
James Egan for defendant Gwyneth Paltrow.
Very good. Let's begin.
Just one second, Bob Sykes, and I think Peter Sorensen will be here also for the plaintiff Terry Sanderson. And I have in the room, my paralegal Eric Jurgensen.
Okay, doctor, can you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead, counsel.
Good afternoon, Dr. Fong. Could you state your name and spell it for the record, please?
Sure. My name is Alina. Oh, I don't know if I should give you my full name. Kapahu Pinea Kalekoa Fong. And I will spell that for you. That's A-L-I-N-A, Alina, K-A-P-A-H-U-P-I-N-E-A-K-A-L-E-I-K-O-A. Fong, F-O-N-G.
Okay. And where were you born?
I was born in Sacramento, California, but moved to Hawaii when I was about 1 month old.
Okay. So where did you grow up?
In Honolulu, Hawaii.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you education before I get into training. But before we start, what is the topic of your testimony today, just in general terms, so we have an introduction for the jury?
Well, from what I understand, I'm talking about a patient of mine named Terry, who sustained a concussion and subsequent post-concussion symptoms after an injury in February, I believe, of 2016.
Okay, thank you. Please describe your education, starting with high school.
Well, I graduated from Kamehameha High School. That's Kemehameha. I graduated in 95, which dates me. I went straight to BYU, where I did my undergraduate work. I also did a master's and a PhD here at BYU. And then went on to my internship residency at the VA hospital in Salt Lake City.
Okay, and at the BYU, what was your graduate degrees in?
So I attained a PhD in clinical psychology with an emphasis in neuropsychology, and my field of study was EEG and fMRI.
Okay, now I'd like to get into your training. Can you describe your training in psychology?
Sure.
And how many years? I'll let you go ahead.
So I had an undergraduate degree, which was 4 years. I then entered a master's program, which was 3 years, and then matriculated into a PhD program, which was 5 years. I had the opportunity to be the only neuropsych emphasis student. So I got to train with one of my mentors, Dr. Aaron Bigler, one-on-one for much of my training. Also other professors in neuroscience. So it was a really wonderful program that allowed me a lot of one-on-one time with these great mentors of mine. I graduated, well, I finished my dissertation and then went off to internship. And I did my internship, like I mentioned, at the Veterans Hospital here in Salt Lake City, right in 2007 and 2008, which you may recall was right during the Iraq and Afghanistan war, so OIF and OEF. And that's where I gleaned a lot more of my concussion training.
Okay, and
Your Honor, would you explain what we're doing here?
Sure, there's portions of the transcript that don't need to be read in court openly, so they'll be skipping over some of that.
any other hospital or clinical work that you haven't already mentioned? Can you tell?
In that edition.
Okay, and any other hospital or clinical work that you haven't already mentioned? Can you tell the jury?
Sure, yes. So this is my 18th year working for Intermountain Healthcare as a neuropsychologist. I started there in neurotrauma rehab, which really was focusing more on inpatient, severe and moderate traumatic brain injury patients. And we had a wonderful multidisciplinary team there, but I did neuropsychological assessments on patients in the hospital and also in the outpatient realm. And I'm still working for IHC. I've been able to help open 2 concussion clinics for IHC, one at Utah Valley Regional and one at American Fork, where I'm still working part-time there. I also work for, I have a clinic here called Cognitive Effects, which is a clinic where we cater to, and we specialize in chronic, persistent post-concussion symptom patients. And then I also have a clinic called Neural Effects, which is located in Provo as well, and we cater more towards the acute, newly injured patients.
Can you explain to the jury the types of TBI victims that you've treated and dealt with in your career?
Sure. Earlier on in my career, I really focused on moderate and severe traumatic brain injury. So these are patients that, you know, either needed neurosurgery or they had a skull fracture or some type of bleeding in the brain, and they were typically in a coma for part of it, whether it was medically induced or part of the traumatic brain injury. I then also moved on to seeing more of the mild realm. So I've actually seen the whole spectrum of traumatic brain injury, but I have stayed in this mild traumatic brain injury realm, which is synonymous with concussion.
What does mild mean in mild traumatic brain injury?
So by mild, we don't necessarily mean the symptoms are mild. What that means is that it's not life or death, okay? So we're not dealing with someone that needs, you know, a shunt placement. We're not dealing with swelling and that we need to remove part of the skull. When the term mild was given, it really just meant that this is a patient with a closed head injury, right? But did not need surgical intervention of that type. So that's where the term mild comes from, but the symptoms can be very, very serious for a patient with concussion.
Hey, you mentioned Aaron Bigler. Can you describe for the jury who he is and what you did studying under him?
Sure. Aaron Bigler has been the president of both of the neuropsychological associations. He is probably the most renowned neuropsychologist because he pioneered this marriage between neuropsychologists and advanced neuroimaging. He has been instrumental in creating and helping mentor other neuropsychologists that have also gone into other types of advanced neuroimaging fields. He's just, I think, probably the most prominent, if not one of the most prominent neuropsychologists to date, internationally.
Okay, let's talk about the clinic. Let's see, in your professional specialties and interests, there's, children, adults in general, and concussion victims. If you could describe that.
Sure. I specialize in the entire age range of concussions. Here at Cognitive Effects, for example, you know, we treat people really between the ages of 8 and 99. At Neural Effects, we see people of all ages, even babies and toddlers. And at American Fork Concussion Clinic, we also see people of all ages.
Okay, and then about your clinic or work, what is it and how long has it been around?
Okay, so again, I have 2 clinics, but I think the one in question would be Cognitive Effects, since that's where I treated Terry. We've been around here in Utah for about 8 years. Prior to that, our first opening was actually in Boston. It wasn't here. We were getting this one off the ground, but the first clinic we opened was in Boston in partnership with Tom Brady, who was, he played for the Patriots at the time. But he and one of his trainers opened up TB12, which stood for Tom Brady and his number 12, but it was TB12 Sports Therapy and Concussion Clinic, and we were the concussion arm of that clinic there. And so that's where it all started, and then 2 years later we opened here in Provo.
Okay. How many employees are at your clinic?
We have about 70 to 75 right now, employees.
Okay, and what types of employees? Let's say starting with the MDs and PhDs, the doctors.
So we have a variety of MDs. We have a neurosurgeon, who's one of my partners, Dr. Lynn Gaffane. We have Dr. Bruce McKiff, who is our in-house neuroradiologist. We have a doctor of nurse practitioner. We have a PhD. We have PhD neuropsychology. We have several PhD clinical psychologists. We have physical therapists, occupational therapists, neuromuscular therapists, cognitive therapists, speech language pathologists, vision specialists, vestibular specialists, neurosensory integration specialists, sensory motor specialists, and so on and so on. I'm sure I'm missing some, but we have all of these therapists that are licensed all in-house, and we are able to do a very intense, multimodal, multi-factored boot camp program here, which caters to these much more chronic, difficult cases.
Like Dr. Sanderson's, Terry Sanderson's?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Before I get to that, Terry Sanderson, the plaintiff, what about the equipment at your facility or your clinic?
Are you referring to the MRI machine that we have?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, we have a 1.5 Tesla MRI machine in-house, which makes it really convenient to be able to scan these patients before and after treatment, sometimes in between treatment weeks as well, to track recovery, to track severity.
When you say recovery, do people recover completely in a clinical setting such as yours?
You know, we definitely have some people that recover completely. They will report they recover completely. I'd say that comprises of about maybe 15% of our patients. About 85% will say that they have significant improvement, but it is a brain injury, and sometimes these effects can be lifelong.
Okay. Let's.
Oh, we lost you, Lawrence.
Oh, you. Okay, you.
Can you hear us?
Lawrence, can you hear me?
Okay, yes. I can hear you. You guys are all fine. I don't know what's going on.
Oh yeah,
Can you
we
hear me
lost
now?
you for a long time there, so you'll
Okay.
have to start that question over.
Okay, where do your patients come from?
They come from all over the world, actually. I'd say maybe about 25% of our patients are from Utah, but 75% come from all over the United States. And, well, no, I'd say about 65% come from the rest of the US, and another 10% come from all over the world. We typically have, on average, about 4 of our 20 patients here, 4 of our 18 to 20 patients coming from Europe, or, you know, we have some from Israel, from Asia, from Canada. So it's a really kind of a United Nations here during our treatment weeks.
Doctor, can I interrupt 1 second? The camera is cutting off the top of your head sometimes. There you go, that's better.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay.
Okay. Now, at your clinic, as you earlier described that you cover all sorts of patients. Can you explain what a closed head brain injury is?
Sure. A closed head brain injury typically means it's a non-penetrating injury. So it's an injury that where there's no skull fracture, but there's like a jolting or kind of a rapid kind of force movement that has the brain, here shaking inside of a skull. But a closed head injury means that there was no penetration of the skull into the brain and no skull fracture.
Okay. And what is an MTBI?
An MTBI is considered a mild traumatic brain injury. And as I mentioned before, mild doesn't mean the symptoms are mild. Mild is just in reference to being juxtaposed to moderate and severe, which mean more of a bleeding in the brain or more kind of organic neurologic findings. So MTBI is synonymous with concussion because a concussion actually, as part of the diagnostic criteria, has no findings on structural imaging, and that means CT and MRI.
And what is PCS or post-concussion symptoms?
So PCS is the name of the complex process that occurs when a patient has been struggling with concussion sequela over a long period of time. In fact, there are different kind of categories of post-concussion symptoms. If you have symptoms for more than 3 to 6 months, for more than that, you can be categorized as persistent post-concussion symptoms or persistent post-concussive symptoms. So what this is just a patient that has concussion symptoms past a certain amount of time, you know, and in Terry's case, you know, by the time I saw him, he was struggling with these concussion symptoms for almost 1.5 years.
Okay. And so are these names closed head injury, MTBI, post-concussion syndrome? These are the symptoms that Terry has?
So, yeah, these are different, I guess, names of different diagnoses that he could have. You know, he had an MTBI, which is a concussion, but then you can also have PCS, because that comes like in a timeline after someone gets an MTBI. But yes, he was diagnosed with a concussion and MTBI, and then also with the sequela, which is PCS, or persistent post-concussive symptoms.
Okay. What are the risk factors for harmful consequences from a concussion?
Risk factors. Okay, so I think what you're asking me are there certain things that a person can go through or have that could increase their chances of having more issues with concussions? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. There are definitely risk factors. There is a study that was done by one of my colleagues, Michael McRae. It was one of these seminal studies that actually pointed out that there are several what we call risk factors that can lead to a more complicated recovery and a more complicated presentation of symptoms. In Terry's case specifically, he met several of them. One was he actually had a prior diagnosis of anxiety and depression. And so having a prior mental health history is one of the big risk factors for PCS and persistent post-concussion symptoms. Another one was migraine history. So if someone has a history of headaches or migraines prior, that is also a risk factor. And another one was some of the structural brain findings that he had as well. I think it was called normal pressure hydrocephaly. Those are also some risk factors for post-concussion symptoms.
In Terry's case, what do risk factors mean?
Well, in Terry's case and in other patients' cases, it means that puts them at a much higher likelihood to have this complicated presentation and this complicated recovery. You know, it's just harder for them to recover, and their symptoms can last longer and feel quite debilitating.
So, in your opinion, Terry has persistent post-concussion syndrome or symptoms, in your opinion, has he recovered, or will he ever recover?
Terry came to my clinic, about 2017, so a little under 6 years ago. And he worked so hard. He really, you know, gave his best effort, and he did notice, and we noticed some definite improvements. But talking to him now, knowing where he is now, it is still showing clearly that he's still struggling. And so, I mean, if I have a fault, it's that I am an eternal optimist, and I always, want to keep treating and keep working, because I know neuroplasticity is real. But, I think we're getting to the point where he's 76, and I do worry that some of these issues may be long-standing, but I still have some hope.
Okay. Let's talk about your process at your clinic. You do a clinical interview. Can you explain why and what that means?
Sure. So before one of the very first times that I met with Terry, I sat down with him and we went over what we call a clinical interview, and that is information gathering. I'm trying to assess what happened to him. I want to know what his symptoms were like. I wanted to hear about the injury that occurred. And so it's a really good way to gather information and to get a really good history of the patient. I'll ask about psychiatric history. I'll ask about some prior medical history. I'll ask about some prior concussions as well. And so it allows me to assess what's going on and to then have a clinical diagnosis based on that clinical interview.
Okay. When you first met with Terry, I think it was August of 2017. Does that sound correct?
That sounds correct, yes.
So that was about a year and a half after the ski crash that is the subject of this case. And what was his diagnosis at the time when he came to your clinic?
Well, he already came with a concussion diagnosis, right? And it was my job at that point to confirm that. I felt that he did meet that criteria, but I also was able to list out a year and a half later, 15 months later, what symptoms he was still struggling with. And for me, what's most important is if those symptoms were things that I thought that I could treat or that I could help him with.
Is self-reporting and clinical questionnaire, like in Terry's case, how normal is that in assessing neuropsychological issues in the medical community or the psychological community?
So, very common. In fact, most of the time, by the time a patient gets to me, they've already had diagnoses from several other clinicians, right? I mean, usually a neuropsychologist is not their first person they go to, okay? But, really, as a clinician, the best way to ascertain if someone has a concussion is to ask them questions. We have some different types of tests that we can do as well, like balance tests and vision tests that we can do with them, which are very easy to do and can be done, very quickly in a clinical setting. But yeah, for the most part, it's talking to them, talking about what symptoms they have, when these symptoms started, and really identifying kind of an inciting event or a cause for what happened and when these symptoms started to come about.
What sense do you have, or any evidence do you have, that Terry might have been malingering, exaggerating, or faking his symptoms?
None whatsoever. Terry showed up to every appointment on time. He gave his best effort. The treatment that we do is very, very intensive. So it required Terry to show up every morning on time, to give his best effort in every single therapy appointment. And we're looking at, in a given week that he was with us, 32 hours of therapy, all right? He was an ideal patient. I got to see him every day while he was here in treatment and got to follow up with him and connect with him. And there was no issue with any of our therapists that he was in any way malingering or faking this. In fact, it was almost the opposite. Terry is, a very, very intelligent man, and he didn't want to be injured. I mean, I think that was really clear. It was he's someone that doesn't want to be sick and was willing to do everything he possibly could to improve where he was at.
Thank you. What is your understanding about his concussion in this ski crash of February 26, 2016? I mean, was the ski crash a cause or the cause of his concussion?
Objection leading.
Okay, I'll rephrase. You're familiar with the ski crash of 2016 he was in February, right?
Correct?
What are, I'm getting at your preliminary opinions at this point. What significant problems was Terry suffering from, in your opinion, from this ski crash of 2016?
Well, he was reporting a myriad of symptoms, including cognitive issues. So, he wasn't, he was fatigued, he wasn't thinking as clearly as he was before. He reported some issues with mood, personality changes, pain as well, headaches, and so on.
And how significant were these problems, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, according to Terry's report, these were quite significantly affecting his life. I mean, it was affecting his personal life, his family relationships, his friendships, his ability to, have self-confidence. He was further isolating. He just kind of, it affected him on so many levels, especially for someone that was used to loving life and enjoying life and traveling and all that. By the time he came to me, that was pretty much gone.
Okay. Oh, I think I was mistaken. Maybe you saw Terry first in May of 2017. How much, how significant I guess what I'm trying to get at is, how can a person with high average or superior scores on testing still be impaired by a traumatic brain injury and suffer persistent concussive symptoms? Can you explain that, please?
Sure. I think what you're referring to is, I know that he completed a neuropsychological evaluation, I believe maybe at the VA hospital. Does that sound right? I don't want to misspeak.
Yes, maybe that's it.
Yeah, and in fact, I know who, Dr. Madsen, I believe, and she was there when I was doing my residency at the VA. She's a wonderful neuropsychologist. What we have, when we deal with concussion patients, okay, we have seen that, especially if they are intelligent or if they are at a higher level of functioning, which, I would assume he would be, considering his education level, him being an optometric physician, you would assume that he's functioning rather well. So with these patients, often the neuropsychological, like paper pencil tests that they can do are not sensitive enough to pick up some of the challenges that he's having. In one sense, maybe his functioning was up here prior to the accident, and then now he's down here, but if everyone else is down here, he'll be kind of in the average, maybe high average range, but, we could assume maybe he was in the superior range prior to that. And so we often see cases where neuropsych testing or neurocognitive testing can be totally normal, but the patient can still have a concussion. And in fact, one of the best
The blank out is intentional.
concussion and brain injury, where to get help. And it says about concussion, it's entitled head, excuse me. We'll be sending this to you right now in the next minute or two, Jane.
I apologize for the difficulty and interruptions. In the old days, we used to just read this to you, so this is much preferable. I guess the old days wasn't that long ago, was it?
Judge, we're about 45% through. Is it, do you want to take a break or just keep going?
How are we doing right now? We can keep going right now? Okay, we'll keep going.
Right now. I'd like to talk about, in particular, Terry Sanderson's case. It's my understanding you recommended that he travel. Why did you recommend that he travel?
So when he completed the boot camp with us, part of what he said that he missed and part of what gave him so much joy was traveling, you know. And as someone like Terry, who I actually really love to travel, right? In fact, as you know, I'm heading to Europe for work to present at some conferences internationally. I encouraged him to try to get back to doing things that he loved. I did caution him that he should not travel alone because of his memory issues and other problem-solving issues. But I did strongly recommend that he try to get back to doing things that he enjoys, and that included travel.
So, how would you describe the treatment then that he's received at your clinic?
So the treatment was very intensive, very targeted and focused to those particular regions, right, that we saw. And it is a boot camp. I mean, he was here with us for a full week. He participated in no less than 32 hours of therapy, and then the rest of those hours were filled with before and after imaging, right? Yeah, he was very compliant, but every day he had at least 1 hour of cognitive therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, neuromuscular therapy, vision, vestibular, and even psychotherapy, right? I mean, you cannot extricate some of the, the depression and anxiety aspects because he suffered from that beforehand. So we made sure he got some of that here in treatment as well.
Hey, Lawrence, if I may, I'm just noting that if she has to leave at 3:30, there's only an hour left, and I have an outline of like 10 pages. So it's going to be tough for me to get through without the rest of the time here.
Okay, we'll try to go quickly. Thank you, Doctor. What are some of the recommendations that you've made after this treatment for Terry in terms of his regular life or outside of the clinic?
I believe I listed my recommendations on a report that was on actually Exhibit 33, if you want to share that one. I have some recommendations on there. I don't have it right in front of me, but, you know,
I'll share it real quickly.
okay,
It's not in color. Do you
that's
remember-
okay. Just go all the way up to the top. Keep going. Okay, so right here, actually, if you go down, so these are some recommendations. I recommended some massage therapy. I know that he was seeing a therapist as well, and I recommended that he continue to do that. If you scroll up again, keep going up. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. Go down right here. So post-epic treatment report.
Anderson had a concussion on or about February 26, 2016.
Yes, it is.
And that resulted in a TBI.
It resulted in what we consider an MTBI. Yes, a traumatic brain injury.
Judge, just 1 second, we're gonna try to find out if we skipped ahead too far.
Page 51, line 12. She just read 11.
No, psychotherapy, I recommended.
Psychotherapy in there.
Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. Go down right here. So post-epic treatment report recommendations. You know, he's still reporting balance issues, dizziness, mental fog, feeling slowed down, difficulty remembering, irritability. And so I recommended, psychotherapy. I recommended some additional cognitive and occupational therapy, as well as neuromuscular therapy.
Okay, these are pages 6 and 7 of the 87 pages of Exhibit 33. Okay. So is it your opinion that Dr. Sanderson had a concussion on or about February 26, 2016?
Yes, it is.
And that resulted in a TBI?
It resulted in what we consider an MTBI. Yes, a traumatic brain injury.
And the cause, he self-reported that his injuries were caused by a ski collision on February 26, 2016.
The wheels kind of fell off the truck for him, so he reported that he was functioning fine.
I didn't want to make an objection in the middle of all that, but I just want. Want to register for the record that we object to or treatment. It sounds like it wasn't related to treatment, but I just wanted to get that on the record.
How are your opinions changed since your deposition? Have they, how have any of your opinions changed about Terry since his deposition?
I don't think they've changed at all. If anything, I fear that.
That's the part right there that you should pause it. And you can pop ahead to line 17.
Experts, including two neuropsychologists, Dr. Eastfold and Dr. Austin. You've reviewed the defense's handpicked experts, including two neuropsychologists, Dr. Eastfold and Dr. Askenazi. What are your responses to their opinions, or at least in their reports?
I mean, they have a lot of opinions in their reports. But again, I want to just emphasize that there's a really big difference between going over someone's chart in another state across the world and actually having that patient in front of me, you know, dejected, crying, helping them. You know, I think it's really easy to criticize someone from that far away, and it's a totally different beast when you're in the trenches with that patient trying to get them out. They have a lot of opinions that I think show that they are not concussion experts, that they are not traumatic brain injury specific persistent post-concussion experts. And I think if I'm being totally honest, a lot of their opinions are easily refutable, if not most of their opinions are easily refutable by just going online and looking at, you know, the CDC recommendations for clinicians and how to treat concussions.
Okay.
With all due respect, but you know, I mean, they do not. I just do not think that they're seeing him as an individual and as someone that is really suffering and has suffered and has done everything in their power to try to get better.
Do you have, or what examples do you have that, of their opinions that you disagree with, if you can recall right now?
Yeah, well, one of the big ones is that they don't think that he has post-concussion symptoms. I don't know if they just don't believe it exists or whatnot, but you know, I mean, it's interesting because I believe all the experts agree, defense and plaintiffs, that he had a concussion. Where we're dividing is whether or not that turned into post-concussion symptoms. And again, it's just they may not be aware of, you know, the litany of research that confirms that post-concussion symptoms are real and persistent post-concussion symptoms are real, despite normal findings on neuropsychological assessment. A lot of their attacks seem to want to place a lot of the blame and the burden on prior diagnoses, like his prior anxiety or his prior depression or his prior headaches or his prior findings. But the important thing to note is that this is a man who at that age of his late 60s was very, very active, was very high functioning, you know, was someone that was volunteering out in the community all the time. He organized social gatherings for people. I mean, this is someone that was engaged to be married, you know, and now has lost even that prospect. I mean, this has completely changed his life, physically, emotionally, biologically, psychologically, and socially. We call it a biopsychosocial model, right? And he has been affected in all those domains. And like I said, a litany of literature will back this up, that, you know, he's not one of the miserable minority. And in fact, so much research will bear out that actually now a majority of patients are still reporting symptoms past the 3 to 6 to 5 year month mark or 5 year mark.
Okay,
Lawrence, are you almost done? Because
yes, I'm on the last page. The defense has mentioned repeatedly normal pressure hydrocephalus, or NPH. How does that factor into Terry Sanderson's condition from this post-concussive syndrome?
Well, you know, so normal pressure hydrocephaly is just kind of this, it's an abnormal buildup or an increase in cerebral spinal fluid in the brain's ventricles, right? And so it was noted, I know in 2009, the interesting thing to note was that he was asymptomatic with this, right? So people can have this and not even know that they have it until, you know, you get a brain scan or something. So I think he was identified as having that, but I believe that the doctor who, or the radiologist or the doctor who ordered that noted that he was not symptomatic at the time. But one of the things that I want to point out is that that was one of the risk factors for him having post-concussion symptoms. That was one of the risk factors for him having a complicated recovery, or, you know, a kind of a more complex pathophysiological process here that I don't think is being appreciated by the defense's experts. You know, it kind of almost made him more fragile and more susceptible to these issues. You know, I just want to point out, they're not mutually exclusive. He can't, it's not that, oh, he has NPH and that's all he has. If you have NPH, imagine, and then you have a significant hit to the head, when you're flopped onto your face, you know, broken ribs and everything, that amount of force is going to cause trauma to any brain, let alone a brain that already has NPH as a diagnosis. So they're not mutually exclusive. If anything, they compound each other.
What are the American Psychological Association Code of Ethics directives on doing exams, according to your understanding, that are involved with these defense experts?
Can you clarify your question? I'm not sure what you're asking.
Are you familiar with the Code of Ethics?
Yes, of course. The American Psychological Association Code of Ethics, of course, yes.
What do they say about doing exams?
You mean like neuro?
Section vague.
Yeah, can you?
Okay. Are they supposed to do them, psychologists, when they're doing exams, such as for Dr. Terry Sanderson?
You mean?
Oh, well, let's skip that. We're running short on time. Are there any other, or what other criticisms do you have of the neuropsychological experts for the defense? Any other before we leave?
I'm sure I do have some, but I'm sure that James will bring them up.
Okay. That's all I have for right now. Thank you, Dr. Fong.
Okay, great. Let's get right to it. Dr. Fong, I'm going to be kind of quick and curt, but it's not because I want to be a jerk. It's just because I have a job to do and want to help us make sure we're getting to the truth here the best that this process can do.
Sure.
So if you wouldn't mind just making sure you really listen to my questions, answer them, especially if it's just a yes or no. It'll help if you just give me that, and then you'll have a chance to explain yourself with some of the other questions as well. So I haven't heard you explain why you can say that Terry's findings are clearly connected to a post-concussive syndrome as against developing Alzheimer's, or he has multiple things listed here. I could go through them, but you get the point, I think.
I do. And
Objection. Misstates facts in evidence.
I'm using my 18 years of expertise as a clinical neuropsychologist and my expertise treating concussions using self-report measures, clinical interviews, using different in-house assessments to determine that. The reason I said that I believe it came from that accident was because, again, I'm using his report that prior to that accident, he was functioning fine. After this accident and the trauma and, all the other physical trauma that happened to him, now he's having these issues. So I just want to clarify.
Okay, well, one of my questions, though, is that you didn't do anything to assess whether there might be past medical history that could explain his findings during your evaluation, aside from received self-report from him. Is that right?
Yes, correct. But
so, okay, so that's, again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be curt. I'm just trying to be quick here.
Letter counsel.
No, Lawrence, you gave me no time, so I'm trying to be quick here, okay? And she'll be able to explain herself. So, Dr. Fong, just to be clear, you did not ask for prior medical records and go through those to see what there might be in Mr. Sanderson's past, correct?
that is not correct.
How is that not correct? At your deposition, you made it really clear that you did not look at prior medical records.
Well, but I did not go off nothing for that. I asked him about his medical history.
Dr. Fong, I did not say that you went off nothing. I very specifically asked whether you went through medical records to look for prior history that might have some influence on Mr. Sanderson's findings in your clinic. And the answer is that you did not do that, correct?
I did not do that for Terry, but I don't do that for most patients that come to me. And so I need to just further correct you that most times when you go to the doctor, you don't come with a whole stack of medical records. You come to the doctor saying, hey, these are my symptoms. This is what's going on. This is what happened. Can you treat me? And so
Sure.
I just want to be very clear. I am not a forensic. I don't do this forensically. A lot of the defense experts, that's when they'll need all these medical records to make all these opinions. I'm a treating doctor. I come with the patient as they are. I'm provided medical records sometimes.
Right, but you did know when you treated Mr. Sanderson that he was in active litigation about exactly the sorts of things you were evaluating him for, and that your testimony, your opinions would be used in this case, did you not?
No, I did not, because there are some people that come in with attorneys that never, ever, ever ask me for an opinion. at all. We have some people that come in without an attorney that through the course of the time get one, and then I have to testify. But I think unlike some of your defense experts, I'm a treating physician 95% of the time. I only do this when I have to in these cases.
Right, but I think you're misunderstanding what I'm getting at. I'm not saying you always testify. I'm saying you knew that your records would be, and your conclusions that you put in your records would be part of, likely be part of litigation, correct?
See, yes, and that word was likely. I don't know though, right? I mean,
Sure.
I treated him like I treat everybody
Of course.
else, because just because someone has an attorney doesn't mean that it's going to go to litigation. And I've been in this game long enough to know that.
No, of course, I know that as well. But because you knew that it was likely to go to litigation, because it was in active litigation, why is it that you didn't ask for records so that you could be as precise as you can be, right? I mean, you should be able to do some interrogation of the facts that you're gathering from him, so that you can feel confident about the results that you offer, correct?
No, and see, this is where I think you're trying to miscategorize me, James. I didn't treat Terry any differently than I treat any other patient that comes to my clinic, whether they're in litigation or not. All my job is to testify as to what I did with him, the treatment that I had with him, and I did just as well with Terry's information that I do with the 18 patients that I have outside my door right now. So in the cases where there are medical records to be seen, I will see them, but I don't think you fully appreciate how busy my clinical practice is. I don't think you fully appreciate how many patients there are with post-concussion symptoms. You know, I mean, of all the traumatic brain injuries that occur, 90% of them are MTBIs or concussions. So I am very, very busy. I do not have time to pore over every single medical record. I take the patient as they come. If they provide me with some, that's fantastic. But my job is to get to work, get this patient better, and to move forward from that point.
Right, but wouldn't you agree, as I think you did multiple times in your deposition, that you, at the time of your evaluation of Mr. Sanderson, had not reviewed or were not aware of multiple aspects of his prior history that could be relevant to your findings?
No, I believe the only thing I didn't know about at the time was the NPH diagnosis. I already knew about the migraine history in the depot. I already knew about the past anxiety and the past depression.
Doctor, we're going to have to go to your deposition, I guess, because I think there are multiple places where you acknowledge that you didn't know some of these things. I don't know if you have the transcript available. I'm happy to go through these, but it's going to take a while, and I don't have time. So
then I don't want to, you know, I don't think you want to misspeak either, you know.
No.
What I can say is that, you know, nothing's perfect. Maybe I missed one or two things here and there, but overall, you know, I assessed someone that was struggling, that listed his symptoms, and we went from there.
Okay, so let's just go through a couple of these things. You were unaware at the time of your evaluation that he'd had 2 neuropsychological evaluations before your evaluation, right, in March 2016 and May 2017. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you also were unaware of the 2009 MRI that he had underwent prior to your evaluation?
Yes, which I stated, yes.
Right. And you were unaware, let's see, of his vision and hearing problems? Or are you saying now that you were aware?
No, and in fact, no, I wasn't aware of his vision and hearing problems at the time. He did not report those to me.
Right.
He did
That's all I need.
Yeah.
That's all I need.
Yeah.
Were you aware that Mr. Sanderson reported to his primary care provider a few weeks before the collision that he felt like, quote, he was getting old all of a sudden?
Maybe not in those specific words.
Okay. I mean, you probably didn't know anything about that, right? Because you didn't look at records.
No, again, what I had was his self-report to me of what he was struggling with. And I just want to point out that the relevance of this is to a treating doctor is not that relevant. I wanted to treat him who he was right here. The fact that he had 2 prior neuropsychological assessments, how would that change my treatment of him, right? Because all I'm saying is he's coming to me with these symptoms. You know, I just want to treat from here on out. I think
Right. No, I get that. You've explained that multiple times. I get that. I'm saying it's relevant because there are experts on the plaintiff side, not just the defense side, that say these prior issues are relevant because the results might be influenced by those prior issues, and you didn't know about them.
But I'm not
You get
saying
that
that
point?
they're, can I finish? I'm not saying they're irrelevant. What I'm saying is, so I knew about the migraines, I knew about some of the psych issues, and what I'm assessing for, James, is these risk factors that set him up to be even more complicated, right? But that still doesn't change how I treated him. So what you are pointing out to me, though, are definitely things that make him more fragile, that make him more susceptible to having more issues after this violent injury that he had, you know? So
Sure, but on that point of violent injury, Dr. Fong, you didn't do anything but just receive his report about what the collision was, correct?
oh yes, that is correct. I received.
And there are and are you aware that there are multiple various fact witnesses that contradict his account?
You know, that's not for me to determine. I'm not an attorney, but all I know is that, you know, this was a significant injury where he lost some consciousness, and he had several broken ribs as well. I mean, this wasn't just a light tap.
Yeah, well, Dr. Fong, but some of those facts are in dispute, including whether he lost consciousness, and you're not aware of that dispute, are you?
Well, the dispute, honestly, James, again, if your experts could just look at the CDC manual.
It's not experts, Dr. Fong, it's the fact witnesses, people that were there that say he did not lose consciousness.
Well, but what I want to point out, James, is that whether he did or did not lose consciousness shouldn't be debated, because actually 90+% of concussions don't lose consciousness at all. So I think that's kind of a red herring, honestly, you know? So if you knew, and if your defense experts and anyone else knew that, it's a red herring. You don't have to lose consciousness to have a concussion. 90% of concussions do not have a loss of consciousness. So
that's not why I'm bringing this up, Dr. Fong. I'm bringing it up to make sure the jury knows the facts, that you were not aware of any of the various claims about how this injury occurred at the time of your evaluation. Is that correct?
That may be, but now that I do know, it does not change my opinion, nor did it change how we treated him, nor does it change that he's still struggling with some of these issues and still needs help.
A good way to get to this is to ask you whether there was anyone prior to your evaluation of Mr. Sanderson that diagnosed him with post-concussive symptoms or syndrome. Are you aware of anyone?
You know, I don't know that, but it just stands to reason that if he had a concussion and he was still struggling with those issues, that right there at that point, it becomes PCS or post-concussion symptoms.
Right, but what I'm trying to get at is that it seems to me that you haven't done anything to scientifically rule out the possibility that prior medical issues are the cause of his abnormalities.
I don't have to.
As opposed to the concussion.
But see, that's what you're not understanding. I don't have to rule those things out. They can be part and parcel. You can have NPH, you can have a migraine, you can have anxiety and depression, and that makes you at much higher risk to have post-concussion symptoms. They're not extricable from each other, you know? I think that, you know, in my last deposition, I quoted a study that had come out in that year, 2017, that actually showed that 72% of concussion patients 5 years later are still having symptoms. There's a study done by Dr. Bigler that same year that showed that only 27% of their cohort, of their patients, only 27% met full recovery. That's, 73% of patients that are not recovering. So again, the data is against you really, because these patients are not recovering like we think they are, and they're still needing help. And the problem is, the longer this goes, the symptoms start to evolve. That's the whole purpose of the study, is that at 5-year mark, and he's way past his 5-year mark now, these symptoms become psychological. They become inextricable from the actual concussion itself. And that is where the research is leading. And if you were a concussion specialist, you would recognize that. PCS is what happens when you have a patient that has had a concussion and is still having those symptoms. And you're right, the anxiety, the depression, the NPH, the migraines, they all contribute, but they are not exclusive. They are all part of this problem.
Right, but Dr. Fong, even plaintiff's experts, including Dr. Boehm, who I deposed yesterday, who's a neurologist for the plaintiff, he says that most patients that have had a concussion, they do not go on to have post-concussive syndrome. In fact, he says it's 5% or less, I believe, is his number for what of the percentage of patients that have a concussion that have persisting symptoms. So do you disagree with that claim?
I do, and I respect neurologists. I don't know who Dr. Bain is, but that was old data. That was data coming out of like 2003. If you look at data coming from 2017 forward, that number ranges from 27% to like 87% now that have these persistent issues. So I do respectfully disagree, but I do have to say that this is all I do all day, every day, is concussion and post-concussion. But that is where the data shows. That's what the data shows now.
But nobody before you talked about post-concussive syndrome or PCS.
Well, I mean, all I can tell you is that I'm a PCS expert, right? My clinic here is about PCS. I don't need another doctor to diagnose with PCS for me to be able to diagnose him with PCS. Does that make sense?
But you just said that you didn't diagnose him with PCS. That's what I'm not getting, doctor. You're saying you don't diagnose him, but then you're saying that you did, and I can't understand what I'm missing.
I don't understand what you're missing either. Terry had PCS. I have no problem saying that I would diagnose him with PCS just based on my interactions with him, the clinical interview, the self-report measures, the assessments. That is what I use. The reason why I would diagnose him with PCS, James, is because by the time he came to me, it had been almost a year and a half post his concussion. Per his report, prior to the concussion, he was asymptomatic. He was living his best life. He didn't have a lot of these symptoms. He did have, of course, the premorbid things that we talked about. But by the time he came to me 18 months later, I just want to make sure that this is clear. By the time he came to me 18 months later, with the constellation of symptoms that he reported, I diagnosed him with PCS. But I think, your job, James, and I think you're doing it relatively, you're trying to do it relatively well, is trying to, convolute this and say that how do you know it's not just aging? How do you know it's not just this? How do you know it's not just this? Because you're ignoring the big event that catalyzed all this, that started all.
No, I'm not. Dr. Fong, I'm not. I have an understanding from other experts, including experts on plaintiff's side, that the vast majority of concussions are treated in a short period of time. It's totally possible, is it not? Just, I want a clear answer on this. Is it not possible that Mr. Sanderson had a concussion, the concussion symptoms resolved, and then he's continued to have other problems that you treated him for that were not concussion related? Is that not possible?
I mean, anything's possible. It is not probable. It is not probable, because I think you are completely ignoring the fact that he had these prior issues, which makes him more fragile and significantly more at risk for these issues.
Yeah, but Dr. Fong, you haven't even reviewed. Sure.
Okay, can I finish? And they're not mutually exclusive. He can have these issues and have a concussion. And sure, I mean, at this point—
I understand that, Dr. Fong. I understand that. You've made that clear. What I'm saying is you didn't do any work aside from getting a self-report from Mr. Sanderson, who you knew was litigating these claims? You did not do anything to figure out what his history was from the time he had the concussion to the time that you treated him. That's correct. Other than self-report from him, you didn't do anything to assess what had happened to him, correct?
That is what I do with all my patients, James.
I know, but that doesn't matter if you've done it with all your patients. I'm just pointing out that you don't have a strong foundation in terms of the evidence to make a strong, confident claim that his concussion symptoms didn't resolve, and then he developed other symptoms or other prior symptoms persisted that were unrelated to the concussion. You didn't do anything aside from speaking to him to assess that. Is that correct?
All I can say to that is that
I need a yes or no on
there
that.
is
That's
no
a
yes or
pretty
no.
simple question.
This is no, it's not a simple question. And here's how I'm going to answer it. I have more time with him. I have more evidence. I have more treating evidence with him. So I'm more apt and have more ability to answer this question than any of the other experts on either side because of the amount of time I spent with him. So if you're going to criticize the amount of time I spent with him and the information I gathered, remember that I'm the one who actually spent that week of treatment with him and have had more contact with him. So of all the experts that, hold on, please. Of all the experts that are opining, I feel like I am the best judge of what happened to him in that case. And so again, you want to criticize me, we can flip that around and say, well, your expert spent no time with him. So, you know, again,
Sure.
I mean, it's back and forth, but all I can say, and I think you're going to keep beating this horse down. I gathered as much information from him as I did with all my other patients. I'm not going to treat him specially just because he has an attorney. He came to me with these problems. I treated him with these problems. And he's, you know, he did get better in a lot of areas. He's still struggling. And that's what the focus needs to be, is he is still struggling. He's done everything he can to get help, but he needs more help.
Sure, but Dr. Fong, while it's true that you have spent a lot of time with him, it's also true that his primary care providers, for example, spent more time with him than you did, right, over many years. Is that not true? I mean, if someone treated him for decades, they have more experience with him than you do in your boot camp, correct?
Well,
Objection assumes facts, not evidence.
yeah.
Please
No,
just
no.
give me a yes or no. That's a simple question.
Objection,
Hold on.
argumentative.
If you're going to someone as a general practitioner versus coming to me specifically for concussion, you're talking about apples versus oranges, James.
Right, but
more
I'm not.
experience with him with concussion. That's what this is about. It's about whether he has concussion symptoms, whether he's still injured. You know, I appreciate that his general practitioner is wonderful and will do all those things and will probably document that, yeah, you know, I'm not sure. I'm not going to assume what he documented, but I think that he spent more time with me as a treating doctor for concussions. Think about that, 32 hours. I don't know if that would add up to, you know, the amount of time that would be spent with him in a general practitioner. I get what you're trying to say, but again, he's not coming to me for general medical problems. He's coming to me for his concussion.
I see. So let me, I know I got to finish up here. I have a lot more.
James, let me quick object. The lawsuit started in January 2019. Her treatment was in 2017.
Right, but you referred, she knew he had attorneys, correct? I mean, she's already answered that question. Okay, so.
That's the problem with PCS, and you could do a lot of research on this. The reason why concussion is considered the most complex disease of the most complex organ is because the symptoms can be so broad and can be attributed to other issues, which is why you need someone who has an expertise in this field to be able to diagnose that correctly or properly.
So in your CV, you said that you're currently authoring a technical paper developing and outlining the standard of care for treatment of post-concussive concussion symptoms or chronic concussion. So that implies to me that standard of care is being developed, that it hasn't actually been developed yet. Is that a fair interpretation?
persistent post-concussion symptom is a different animal from concussion. And so as far as setting, you know, there is no standard of care with these really complicated concussions. All we're getting close to is that these cases are so difficult and so hard to manage that the decision of what imaging to use, what to do with these patients is done by clinician on a case-to-case basis. It's a problem that people are recognizing, and now we're adding that COVID long hauler is, you know, another one of these issues. It just bears to the fact that you can have so many different experts saying so many different things, that, you know, it kind of leaves that part open. But for someone like me, who, like I said, I've treated 7,000 concussion patients, not much left there's not much left to a ton of interpretation for me. I've probably seen more than, and again, I'm talking specifically about this persistent post-concussive class of people, right? I've probably seen more than most other clinicians in the world. That's why I get referred to from physicians and clinicians all over the world.
Okay, a couple real quick questions, and we'll be done. But as I understand from your deposition, you're not board certified. Is that correct?
It's not a requirement. Nope.
Right, but just to answer the question, the answer is no.
I said no. I said no, but it's not.
Oh, sorry. Okay, got it. Sorry, I didn't hear that. So, and you did not do a fellowship training, is that right?
No, that's absolutely not true. I did 2 years of fellowship in a postdoc while I was here at the hospital. So I actually trained under Dr. Jim Snyder, who was a neuropsychologist. So I actually meet all the requirements to do it, but I'm just old enough really where it hasn't affected my career, or it's not something that I need to do.
Okay.
Newer neuropsychologists do have to do that, but again, I meet all the requirements for that.
I see. Well, I apologize because I didn't see any fellowship listed on your CV, so that's why I thought you talked about an internship at the VA, but that's separate from your fellowship training?
Yep. So after that, in order to meet the requirements to be certified, you have to spend 2 years working under a neuropsychologist as well, which I did that right out of my, right after I left the VA hospital working with the veterans.
Okay, I see. And you actually have like a certificate, maybe it's on the wall behind you, that says fellowship. I completed a fellowship in neuropsychology or whatever.
So I am kind of right in that mid phase where I kind of I'm grandfathered in under other under that fellowship requirement, because again, back when I graduated, it was kind of a newer thing, and not a lot of neuropsychologists needed to get it done. It's really more for this new generation coming out. I haven't needed to do it. It hasn't affected my authority or my expertise in any way.
Okay, but it wasn't called a fellowship then, or was it called an internship? I'm just trying to get the term.
No, it was just postdoctoral work, postdoctoral work, yeah, full-time under a neuropsychologist.
I see. So it wasn't called specifically like fellowship training?
No, it wasn't,
okay.
no.
Got it. And I believe in your deposition, you reported that Mr. Sanderson told you, I think the day of your deposition, that he had fallen, hit his head, and had this 45 minutes of loss of consciousness. Do you recall that?
I do recall that because I reread my deposition right before this.
And I guess you haven't evaluated him since then, so it's hard for you to say whether he has symptoms relating to that.
That's correct.
And do you know whether he saw any medical treatment for that?
Not that I'm aware. I didn't ask. Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Would you recommend treatment after an experience like that? An injury, I guess I should say.
Yeah, of course I would. I would.
Okay. So maybe you answered this when Mr. Bueller was asking you questions, but it seems like the treatment that you provided you saw as successful, but you have since learned that Mr. Sanderson has gone downhill, was I think the term you used in your deposition. why did the treatment not stuck? Or I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, but you get what I'm asking, right? That if he was treated for it and it went well, why does he still have these symptoms, and maybe they're even worse now?
Yeah. So, and we know when I say successful, I don't mean 100% full recovery, right? I mean, you know, he by successful, I mean that there are definitely some areas that improved, and even he reported some improved, symptoms. But you know, yeah, I think one of the reasons is he wasn't done, right? I mean, we did a week with him. I still had some issues that I noted there. I recommended some further treatment for him. But you know, it's a brain injury, you know. I mean, it's and I only get a week with them. Like I said, in some cases, you know, especially in younger patients, they can get better pretty quickly, and we never hear from them again, and they're off. But you know, to be honest, Terry was already, I don't know, maybe he was in his 70s by the time he came to us. I'm not sure, maybe 70s, I don't know. But you know, older adults do tend to have a little bit of a harder time, you know. There's not as much neuroplasticity. I mean, there could be a lot of reasons. I think some of the reasons too could be the premorbid issues he had, you know, like the NPH and the prior migraines and other things that, you know, made his recovery harder and more complicated.
I think I'm,
Okay.
yeah, I think I'm done. Let me just look at one more page if I may. Is that okay? I'm sorry to take your time here.
Why don't we go on a break then?
Back on record, the time is 4:01.
Thank you, Dr. Fong. That'll be it.
That's it?
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Fong. Again, I apologize for, I could have treated you better, but it was sort of felt time crunched. I had a lot to get to. I didn't mean to interrupt a bunch, but thanks for being patient with me.
Thank you, James, and thanks for everyone to hearing me out here. And yeah, appreciate it.
Okay, that completes Dr. Fong's testimony, and we'll take our recess now.
Who's next? Shay is the daughter? Polly. Polly. Thank you.
I told you yesterday.
I wrote it down.
Thank you. Mr. Sykes, you may proceed.
You would call Polly Grasham.
Thank you.
Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give to the court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you.
Over here.
Have a seat.
Good morning, Ms. Grasham. Would you start by stating your full name and spelling it?
Sure.
You might need to move that microphone a little bit to the center. There you go.
Okay. My name is Polly Sanderson Gresham. Need spelling?
Yeah, would you spell it?
Okay. Polly is Polly. Sanderson, Sanderson. Gresham is spelled Grasham.
Tell the jury, if you would, your age.
Yeah, just turned 49.
Okay. We all thought of 39, so don't worry about that. Now, tell them a little bit about your background in terms of where you grew up, your education, et cetera. Take us through university.
Okay. Grew up in a small town in southern Idaho, Soda Springs.
Okay.
Graduated from high school there in 1992.
Okay.
Went on to college at the University of Idaho in Moscow. Left there in about 98.
Okay.
Moved to Missoula, Montana, and finished my degree there in 2005 at the University of Montana.
Okay. Where are you currently living?
So I reside in the northern region of Idaho, the Panhandle, kind of on the southern end of Lake Coeur d'Alene.
Okay. Are you married?
I am. My husband and I have been married for almost 25 years.
Okay. And how long have you lived in the Coeur d'Alene area?
So we were up north going to college in Moscow, and then we had that 5 years in Missoula, and then returned back in 2005 to North Idaho.
Okay. What do you do there? What's your occupation?
Yeah, so I work for the University Extension System. I teach.
The University of Idaho or
University
ISU?
of Idaho,
Huh?
yep. So some people are familiar with the 4-H program. I teach STEM education for youth, ages 5 through 13. So bring science, technology, engineering, math to schools. And I'm also a master food safety advisor. So anyone in the community that wants to safely preserve their food, I teach pressure canning classes, things like that.
Okay. And is that your only job up there, the extension service, or you have other jobs you do?
That's my paid position, and then I volunteer with other things too.
Okay, and your husband, what does he do?
He's employed through the Forest Service, so he's been a wildland firefighter for 31 years.
Okay. I hope he doesn't have much to do this summer, hopefully.
We all hope
Yeah.
that.
All right. Now, you're Terry's daughter, is that correct?
That's right. So Terry has 3 daughters, and I'm the middle one.
Okay, and who's the older one?
So my older sister is Shay, and
Yep.
she's about 2.5 years older than I. And
So she's 50. Okay, you need to answer yes or no so they can think.
Yes.
Okay. And so how often have you seen him during these last few years? Let's say after 2010.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was a little harder when he moved to Salt Lake City.
Sure.
I think he loved all that Salt Lake City offered, concerts and skiing, but it was a further distance from, my sisters and I are relatively close, so, but we would make time to be together on the holidays, usually travel to see him in the summer. I'd say 2 or 3 or 4 times a year.
Okay. And for how long? I mean, would you be a few hours or a few days or a week or what?
Yeah, typically a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's say in the 5 or 6 years or so before this February 26, 2016 ski crash. Describe for the jury his activity level in everything you can think of. You live in Idaho. I've lived there, in the Coeur d'Alene, Idaho area. And you've lived there since about '05, roughly? Okay, you need to answer yes or no so they can think.
Yes.
Okay. And so how often have you seen him during these last few years? Let's say after 2010.
Yeah, so it was a little harder when he moved to Salt Lake City.
Sure.
I think he loved all that Salt Lake City offered, concerts and skiing, but it was a further distance from, my sisters and I are relatively close, so, but we would make time to be together on the holidays, usually travel to see him in the summer. I'd say 2 or 3 or 4 times a year.
Okay. And for how long? I mean, would you be a few hours or a few days or a week or what?
Their career or profession, he would offer to review their resume, practice interview skills, things like that. And he was very proud of, being able to help this person grow into their full capacity.
What is the green team at Sundance? What is that exactly?
I think it's just cleanup. I think in between showings or in between music venues, right, they go in and they clean up and they sort what can be recycled. And
What type of activities in these 4 or 5 times a year that you saw him, what kind of activities did you do with him? Describe those.
just enjoyed our time together. So cooking dinner, we spent a lot of time outdoors, so going for walks, bicycle rides, hikes. We hadn't gone skiing in the last couple of years. That was an activity that we did together. We'd go boating. We would go to museums. A lot of times we would take my daughters or my nieces to museums. Yeah, just generally catch up.
How many children do you have?
I have 2 daughters.
And how old are they?
So my oldest Hope is 25, youngest Anna is 22.
How did Terry get along with him?
Before the accident? He was always just a big cheerleader, knew what was going on in their lives, followed up with their classes, showed up for events, would go to things like basketball games when he was in town.
Was he able to, if you saw him in, let's say, December, and you next saw him in March, did he keep in his mind prior to the ski crash what they had been doing? Could he remember those things?
Oh, yeah. And they're friends, too, right?
Names of the friends?
Names of the friends, yeah. Granted, it's a small town.
What's the name of the town, actually?
So I live in between Harrison and St. Mary's.
Okay. It's got a St. Mary's address.
It does, closer to Harrison, but
Okay. Did you ever do projects together of any kind?
Yeah, because that's what dads do, right? He
Just
would.
like the jury.
Yeah, so a lot of, repair projects I might have around the house. He helped me install the irrigation in my garden beds, and I had a leaky sink. Got anything that had not working, electrical that I was having issues with, he knew where my husband's toolbox was, and he was always willing to help me figure things out.
Okay, tell the jury, if you would, about your dad's personality. His personality before the crash.
I think in my description of him, I mentioned he's just really fun-loving, gregarious, was really quick with a joke and a smile, and just real positive.
Was he easy to be around?
Oh, definitely, yeah, and just made everything kind of smooth.
Did he have any negatives that repelled people that you can think of?
Any what?
Negatives that repelled people.
Oh. Sometimes I think when you are kind of that energy, right, you have to be mindful of the fact that of other people too. And I think he had the tendency to, sometimes not always notice everyone in the room, or he was a little bit more self-aware, I'd say.
All right. What about his mental status? You've mentioned a few things that cross over into that area, but just kind of summarize for the jury his mental status as you observed it prior to the ski crash.
So my dad was smart. I used to describe him kind of as a Mensa mind, and sometimes I think that can almost get you in trouble. But really, really smart, quick to figure things out. I have a memory one time when he'd come to visit, and my dryer wasn't working at the time, so I'd hung diapers out on the line, and he'd said, "Why are you not using your dryer?" I said, "Well, it's taken apart. James had to leave." And so there was all sorts of parts. Originally, James thought it was the heating element. It wasn't the heating element. Yes, he'd taken it entirely apart. And my dad was able to troubleshoot it and put it all back together again. And he did that all the time. Like he could figure things out, troubleshoot things.
Do you understand the term executive function?
Somewhat. I think of it as the ability to get things done, multitask, run our legs.
Multitask, good.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you describe to the jury, describe your dad's executive function status before the ski crash?
Yeah, definitely just a manager and really a multitasker. Had a lot going on, far more than I would be willing to take on. I think he liked that. Like I said, he was a mover, a goer. So that was just how he operated.
Now, your dad got divorced from your mom. About what year was that?
I was a senior in high school, so 1992.
Okay. A little less than 2 years before the ski crash, he met someone named Carlene Davidson. Did you come to know her, and would you explain to the jury how you came to know her?
Yeah, I did. Really liked Carlene, and my sisters liked her too, her and her little dog. And they just seemed like a good pair.
Why do you say that? What did you observe about Carlene and Terry that made them a good pair?
They were just loving towards one another. She had girls in St. George and parents, and I liked seeing that they, like my dad helped her sell her parents' house, and empty the furniture out and things like that. I just saw them as being really supportive and loving to one another. I think they had fun together. They laughed a lot. It was kind of, it gave me hope. I could see my dad growing old with her for sure.
And how often do you think you saw them together
Uh-huh.
prior to the ski crash.
Yeah. I remember one time coming through, we had an exchange student with us from Japan at the time, and we went to, is it Lagoon, the local amusement park here, and so rode all the rides with my dad and with Carlene.
What year
And
was that roughly?
2015. Just had a lot of fun. But yeah, she would come for the holidays. She was there at my daughter's graduation party. So
So if your dad came, she came during that time?
correct.
Okay. Either in Idaho or if you came down to Salt Lake?
Yeah, she was here. Yeah.
Did you ever notice your dad to be accident prone or clumsy or bump into things, anything like that?
Prior to the accident?
Yeah.
No, he had really great balance and activity level.
Did he have any problem that you ever noticed? Now, when you came down here, did you ever fly or did you drive?
Oh, both. We did both.
Did you go on car trips with him or to the store or to the lagoon, that kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever notice him having any problems driving?
Prior to the accident, no. Again, with his multitasking, he would tend to maybe take on more things that I would be comfortable. I would say, "Here, I'll take that call for you," or
So he would be driving and take a call.
Yes,
Okay.
which at the time I had team drivers, so I kind of had these hard and fast rules that it's like, if you're going to be driving, you need to tuck your phone away, right? And so it felt a little bit hypocritical if Dad was in the car to be like, you're not going to answer your phone, right? Because these teens are watching you, and so he might have been capable of that. I mean, he hadn't had accidents or anything, but that was probably a bone of contention, I think, not just for myself, but my sisters too. Yeah.
What about health problems? Did you ever notice any health problems with him in the several years prior to the ski crash you were aware of?
So that's one of our hobbies that we share, because I'm pretty into wellness and
Okay.
supplements too. I think his health, I think he managed it. He did have issues. He had prostate cancer. He had some issues with his eye. I mean, I was aware, and I'd come for some of those appointments. I don't know all of it, and that became apparent in my deposition that, I haven't reviewed my dad's medical records or anything. It's only what he's shared with me.
Or what you observed?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So, do you have any chronic conditions that you remembered that were prominent and you observed them? Now, he had cancer, but that was cured, right?
Yeah. I went through radiation and everything for that.
Yep. Anything come to mind?
I think he'd had, I think he had migraines and some headaches.
How
Not all
often?
the time, rarely, but I remember when they hit, it would be a hard go.
Rarely, you said?
Rarely, but I think those existed.
What about sleep apnea? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I think he did have some trouble sleeping.
Did he have a CPAP machine, or how did he treat it, if you know?
That's a great question.
Okay.
I don't know.
You don't know. What about depression?
Prior to the accident, I wasn't aware of any struggles with depression. I
what
don't know that he would have been honest in sharing that
Okay.
with me.
What about losing energy? Did you ever notice him to be losing energy before the ski crash?
No, and usually it was me that if we were together, I'd be like, I need to take a break.
What about alcohol? How when you were down here? Did he drink alcohol?
I've seen my dad drink before, a beer or a glass of wine. I have never seen my dad intoxicated or anything that I felt like was too much.
Okay.
So I came in on Monday night, and we had some tea together, and then I think he's had a beer since I've been here.
Okay. Did you ever notice that he had memory problems or forgetfulness prior to the ski crash?
No.
What about skiing? What was your conversation about skiing prior to the ski crash?
So, my history too. I don't know if you want to know that.
Sure.
My family started off cross country skiing. I think I was probably about a kindergartner. And
This is in
we
Soda.
lived-
This is Soda Springs.
Soda Springs,
Yeah.
yeah. It was really great country, and it was, you know, something that we could do as a family. And so we'd pack a picnic, and we spent a lot of weekends like that. And then, I think probably about 1984, we kind of picked up downhill skiing, and gosh, it was a lot less work getting up the hills.
Yeah.
Fun. And we had, you know, family cousins that would come ski snowbirds, so we would come up and ski with them and practice, and then
You would come down from Soda Springs to ski snowbird?
yeah,
Okay.
and say I think our cousins had a condominium at Snowbird, so we would get to crash with them, and it was, you know, lots of kids, lots of cousins. And so then in 1986, one of my good friends, her dad was ski patrol at Targhee, and so we would go most weekends to Targhee and ski together.
What kind of skier was he?
He was a better skier than I was.
Okay.
And he liked to have fun, but I don't think he took a lot of risks, you know. He was kind of what you would think of as an old man skier, just out to enjoy the day.
So he would sometimes go fast, sometimes with the kids he wouldn't go so fast?
Yeah. And he skied with my kids several times, and
Would you rate him as a intermediate or advanced or expert?
I would say between advanced and expert at his best.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did he love skiing? Was it something he loved?
Yeah. I think it was a big reason for him when he retired to come down this direction. I think it was something he loved to do.
I don't know if I've asked you this, but did you ever notice a vision impairment in any way affecting his skiing? Are you aware of that in any way?
You know, after he had that occlusion in his right eye, I think the binocular vision, it was harder to see depth, so it was a little more flat for him. Mm-hmm. I felt like he was a little more cautious as a skier, for sure.
Was he generally a healthy person prior to the ski accident?
Yes.
Any particular medical problems you're aware of that he had prior to the accident?
You had mentioned the sleep apnea. We talked about prostate. No.
Anything come to mind? No? Okay.
No, sorry.
Now, let me talk about the ski accident. How did you learn about the ski accident?
In my memory, at first I thought it was a phone call.
Okay.
I remember telling me that my dad, that he had.
Can we just get a little foundation? Who made the call? Do you mind, Your Honor?
I think, if the objection is relevant, so I'm going to overrule it, and you can bring it out on
And it's
cross.
hearsay then.
Okay.
Without
Sustained?
Okay. Tell us how you learned about the ski accident.
I wasn't sure if it was my dad that called me or my sister that called me.
Okay. Could it have been Carlene, maybe, possibly?
It could have been, for sure.
So you don't remember exactly who told you, but someone called you.
Yeah.
Okay.
That there had been an accident on the hill that day.
So this is here now hearsay.
It is. I don't think she's attributing it to any particular individual. If the question is, why don't you ask when she became aware of it?
When did you become aware of the ski accident of, I don't mean to lead you, but February 26, 2016?
It feels like that evening, you know, I think of it that day, that he felt he had broken some ribs. That was painful. And I think the words were, you know, he got his bell rung.
Bell rung.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever find out at any time that Gwyneth Paltrow was involved?
I don't believe that night.
Okay.
it was after the initial accident.
Tell the jury about the details of your association with Terry, your father, after the crash.
Mm-hmm.
When did you come down, and how often have you seen him in the past 7 years?
Right.
Summarize that, would you?
Right. So I don't think I saw my dad in person until Hope's graduation, which would have been the end of May of that year.
Did you have telephone calls that you exchanged before that?
Yeah, we did,
How
and
often?
text messages. You know, I thought my dad and I talked probably every couple of weeks. The defense during my deposition had pulled phone records, and it didn't look like it was as frequent before that. So it could have been one of those spells. My sister had an injury, so I was kind of spending a lot of energy taking care of her as well, and my nieces, making sure she had some solid ground. And so with my dad being here in Holiday and knowing he was with Carlene, I felt like things were being kind of taken care of.
So you felt comfort that Carlene was with him?
Yeah, because I wasn't. And I knew he was, following up with medical care. My dad, being in that occupation, values that and makes sure that, someone's looking at, checking on that, making sure damages aren't permanent, those kind of things.
Just so it's clear, I've been to Coeur d'Alene. Is it about a 12-hour drive to get to Salt Lake from there?
That sounds about right.
Yeah. And if you fly, you have to drive to Spokane or Missoula, is that it?
Yeah, I flew out of Missoula, but you can fly from Spokane as well. I think the other part of that is with the pandemic, that made a little more travel restrictions in the last few years. I definitely have not got to spend as much time with him recently.
Let's talk about your dad after the ski crash. Describe, if you would, his ability to keep things in control and keep things organized after the crash.
Directly after the crash, I would say a good year and a half, I felt like, I don't want to say stupid, that's not the word, but like his processing speeds, like the effort that it took, definitely when we were in person for Hope's graduation, I felt like, wow. There was a time when he's sitting in a chair by my window.
In Idaho?
In Idaho, and I almost expected drool to be coming out of his mouth because first of all, he wasn't engaged with anybody. He had kind of taken himself to a remote corner, and I just felt that was my first real kind of slap in the face of like something's terribly wrong.
How about his ability to keep from getting frustrated and overwhelmed? That change at all?
I think that's the biggest change right now, right?
Well, tell the jury about it.
Yeah, I think I describe it. He's really, the details and the minutia. Like he can't see the forest for the trees. It's very much gets stuck in really small things. And so for me, it's always that pullback of like, well, let's look at the big picture. Even just last night, I was thinking about, when you write an essay and you have a topic sentence and then you add supporting sentences with some details for that main sentence. It's like the main sentence is gone and all we have are the little details. And so then you're kind of going, well, then, so how does this relate to that? I think he's just, I think it's part of the frustration is he gets really caught up in details and connections and the primary focus or purpose, we lose that. And so then I have to come back around and I have to say, oh, how does that connect with the kimchi we were talking about, or the damage to your phone port? Like, I have to kind of bring it full circle. And then, you know, I think he gets frustrated and angry. I have tried to, you know, remind him that, because before he could have lots going on, and now it's very A to B. A to B, don't throw in a C or a D, right? Because then we're gone completely. So how do we simplify, you know, and just this task, just A to B. And I had a conversation with my dad and my sister Jenny's boyfriend Nathan, and I was trying to say, you know, maybe take it as kind of a gift to be in the present with what you're doing right now. You know, let's just focus on this one step. And I think that's easy for me to try to say, how do we move forward? But I understand that there's a lot of grief and loss for the way that his life functioned before, that it doesn't function now. He doesn't always appreciate my let's stay in the moment, or what are the gifts, what we can learn from now. He's still kind of grieving and frustrated that he doesn't think the way he thought before functioned the way he did.
Any change in his ability to get things done?
It's really messy right now. It's really hard. And I say, Dad, you can hire somebody to do that. You know, if your house is messy, let's get some help. Or somebody can help you with the blowing out the sprinkler system. Like, those are things we can have other people help you do. But I think he has a hard time with the way they do the work, and he's kind of real negative, and it doesn't feel like that's been an answer for him. And I tried to lead him in that direction so that he doesn't feel like there's just so much. And he'll say that I'm so behind. I'm so behind. I can't get things done. Even coming to his house this week, right? I know that this has been something he's put a lot of time and effort into, but I could tell that it's just piles of things. Lots of notes, you know, you can tell he's putting in all of the effort, and there's a lot of busyness, but it's not effective, right?
How about any change in his ability to stay oriented or become disoriented? Explain that.
Yeah, definitely disoriented. And my dad always had a good idea of kind of north-south. But yeah, he'll say, oh, I can get you there, but I've come to rely on my navigation device when I come. Because he does get confused, even just going down to the park.
Has he gotten lost with you?
Yes.
Tell the jury about that.
Well, we were headed down to Sugar House Park, you know, and this was when I had come down for the deposition, so 2020, June of 2020. Yeah. He's like, oh, it's real simple, you know, we'll just go here and there, and we got somewhere, and it was like, I don't think this is right. And then, you know, pull up my Google Maps on my phone, and he's like, no, I can find it, you know, and he's like, I just need a minute, you know, and
so he got lost.
Yeah. I don't think that was as bad of a situation, right? He's with me, he's not alone. I have Google Maps. But yeah, besides just the directionality thing, we spent a summer day out on the lake, and kids, we had attached an inner tube so that we could pull them behind on the boat. And my dad could not secure the boat or the inner tube to the boat, and just like a simple hitch knot, you know, and it came off once, and he said, oh, you know, you just kind of embarrassed my husband, like showed him again, you know, the next time. I think it was probably the third time. He just shook his head, you know, like he couldn't secure the knot of the, yeah. Yeah.
Is that unusual for him? Is that a change?
Yeah, definitely.
Did you have a chance in the 6 months after the crash to observe your dad and Carlene interacting?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what you observed about Carlene helping him and what happened to that relationship.
Yeah, I mentioned that me seeing him in person was about 3 months after the accident, and I just really saw Carlene step up in a way, you know, of, oh, Terry, don't forget your jacket. We're getting ready to go. Repeating conversations that he had missed where he was like maybe out of the picture, and she would fill him in of, you know, Anna's gonna go here, or yeah, she just was caring and stepped up where he seemed a little slow.
What happened to that relationship?
I don't really know. I wish I'd had the opportunity to really talk with her, but I didn't. Like I said, the last time I saw her was at that graduation, and so
that was May of
2016, and I think because we had neighbors and friends and my mom and everyone there, I didn't get to have a private conversation really about how my dad was doing, and or you know how their relationship was going and if she was doing okay.
At Hope's graduation, your mom came?
Yes.
The one that he had divorced, right?
Right.
And how'd they get along?
They don't get along. There's usually a lot of distance. I mean, they share family members, so I think they're respectful of that and come to the celebration, shared celebrations, but they don't usually converse or connect.
Was he respectful?
Was my mom respectful?
No, your dad.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
That go round.
That go round, okay. Any change in his social life and friends that you observed?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what it would be.
You know, I'm not super close with his friendships, but it does feel like they've kind of fallen away. Relationships, friendships has been really hard for him to navigate.
You told me once that it was a lot harder for him, he had to work a lot harder to be a friend. Is that a fair statement? Explain that. Explain that.
It feels like after the accident, he's a little more involved with his own world, and that's harder to sustain connections when it's kind of about me right now. That's a change. And that makes it really hard to just to genuinely care about people. That's part of our connection.
Have you observed any personality changes, and if so, what have you observed?
I think it's kind of connected to feeling overwhelmed. So he's easily frustrated. He gets agitated, angry for the first time. Like I didn't have memories of him being an angry person, but he's got a pretty short fuse these days.
Since the accident?
Yes. Yeah.
What about any other personality changes come to mind?
I think he's just a little more cautious, not as confident.
Is he having fun?
No. I think he's in a really negative place, and that's hard for me as his daughter.
Based on what you have seen since the crash, okay, as a daughter who apparently loves him, it's evident, would you recommend that he travel overseas by himself?
No.
Why not?
No. I think the disorientation, I think he needs help. I think.
If he goes with someone, is that okay, do you think? If he has a friend that goes with him?
I think it depends on the someone.
All right. Someone who's trustworthy.
Yeah, who cares about him?
Any observations about executive function changes since the ski crash?
Well, I mentioned just no ability to multitask, really.
He's lost that.
Yeah. I think, again, not seeing the forest for the trees, really, really caught in minutia. And I don't see him like reading a book or, you know, those kind of things that would previously be enjoyable.
Just a few more questions for you. Everybody has negative traits, right? Or traits that aren't refined to the extent that it would be helpful to be refined, right?
Sure.
Okay. And your dad probably has some of those. I'd like you to tell the jury if you saw any increase in intensity of negative traits after the ski crash. If so, what did you see?
I have this example that had happened when we were sitting on his back deck on a summer day, and I could kind of see into the neighbor's back patio, and it looked like she had done a lot of work. She had kind of some neat rugs and place to meditate, and I was like, wow, that's a neat spot they created there. And my dad you know, started going on about where they had planted a tree and right in his view, and I thought, okay, that's super small and petty. You have a really beautiful view right here, you know. And then he said, I'm pretty sure like she puts her garbage can right there. She does that just to make me mad. And then he said, you wouldn't believe what she did. I did get a letter from her apologizing. She sent a card saying, I am so sorry, I shouldn't have done that. But when he wasn't home, she had gone and moved a pile that he had that was just outside of his gardening stuff and tools and kind of a messy pile. He had put it on his boundary, and so that was probably what she was seeing when she was gonna meditate or whatever. And so she had come over to move the pile so that it was out of sight. And so in this card, she had just said, I just wanted to apologize. That was so wrong. And he was so upset that she had done that. And I said, that's really huge of her to acknowledge.
So he refused to acknowledge the apology?
Yes. And the fact that she was human, had made a mistake, she had apologized. And I kept thinking, you know, those relationships with our neighbors, I love my neighbors. And my dad's always had good neighbors, right? So I thought, we had gotten into kind of a disagreement that morning because I was like, those are really small things.
How different is that from how he was before the crash?
I feel like, you know, even if you had a difference of opinion, we could always kind of reason through it, agree to disagree, get along, take care of one another. And so that was a hard thing for us to talk about, is that that's small and you're bigger than that, you know. And it's kind of reversed because he was my dad that gave me those values, and then it feels like they've kind of fallen away and he's stuck in that. But I'm so mad and I'm so frustrated, you know.
Any change in his cognitive functioning that you haven't already talked about? Kind of summarize that, would you? Cognitive functioning.
Yeah, I think his operating system is not quite as slow as that initial year and a half where I was just, well.
There's been some improvement.
Some improvement. I think he's been really dedicated to sort of
working hard.
He is a I will work hard kind of guy, maybe to a fault, but yeah.
What about the negatives? Any negatives in his cognitive functioning that remain? You've seen. You've mentioned some already, but...
And a lot of it goes with that inability to multitask. I think I see it in that, if I could describe, like, when we're conversing or whatever, I don't feel like he hears me. I don't feel like when he has a conversation with my kids that he actually hears them. I think he's like processing or thinking about what he's going to say next, but that is something that's really apparent to me, that I just feel like, where are you? Where is your headspace right now? Because you're not here with me or with my kid. You know, I can witness that.
I want to talk to you about changes in friendships. We already talked about Carlene Davidson.
Right.
Do you know someone named Robin Dale?
I do.
Was there a change in that friendship? And if so, tell us what it was.
Yeah. That turned out to be pretty bad. To the point where, and they had traveled together. I think they went to Costa Rica, maybe.
After the crash, right?
After the crash, they would have gone. They would have traveled.
What happened to Robin Dale?
Yeah, I was at the public library one day and I got a phone call from Robin, and
About what month of what year, give or take?
gosh, I wish I'd brought my phone or had it. Following court rules, I think 2017, if I had to guess. She said,
Sustained?
Well, I'm not offering for the truth of what happened, but just for how this affected his friendship.
and
Just-
Still your second.
I don't know how you can separate it. You're offering up for what purpose?
I want to show how the friendship changed.
Okay, I'll allow it for that limited purpose.
Go ahead.
so she called and she had said, I need you to reach out to your dad. I'm not feeling safe right now, and I'm going to have her young son, you know, we're going to move back into my place. And I said, what do you mean you don't feel safe, you know? And she had said, I've asked your dad several times not to attend my yoga class, and he has shown up. And I'm thinking, seriously? Like, you asked him and he showed up again? At some point, I had texted her back and just said, I thank you for trusting me, and I will reach out to my dad. I'll have my sisters, and we'll offer some support. This is strange for me. I don't know my dad to be unsafe, right? But I also wanted to believe her, because I think it's important that we try to believe people. But her experience said that, you know, he had changed, that she didn't feel safe. And I said, get yourself to a safe place then, and I'll follow with my dad. I then did call my dad and said, please don't do that. He said, I'm not going to hurt her. There's nothing, you know. I said, she has asked you, and you need to respect that boundary. That's important, that you, if she doesn't feel good, that you respect that.
So that ended the relationship, essentially.
That was it, yes.
Okay. What about,
I indicated at the beginning of the trial that if there was any evidence received for limited purpose, that I would give an instruction to the jury. So members of the jury, some evidence is received for a limited purpose only. When I instruct you that an item of evidence has been received for a limited purpose, you must consider it only for that limited purpose. In this case, this evidence was not offered as to the truth of what, is it Robin?
Robin Dale.
What Robin Dale said to the witness, but rather as to this witness's understanding of the relationship change.
That's correct. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Do you know Mark Harris?
I do. So that would be my brother-in-law's brother.
Your brother-in-law's brother? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So Shay is married to a Harris, right?
Correct.
And that Harris has a brother named Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did that relationship
Yes.
change, if you know?
I know they spent a lot of time before the accident together, and I don't believe they spend as much time.
Do you know why it changed?
I do not.
What about someone named Sakia, S-A-K-I-E, from Holland? Are you aware of that person?
Yeah, again, she had come over from the Netherlands, and that relationship didn't work out, and she left.
You mentioned a few things about this, but other than what you've already said, I don't want you to repeat what you've already said, but what about anger, his ability to control anger? Did that change?
Yeah, I think the frustration, the temper, yeah, very much so. I have a memory, my younger sister, Jenny, and I decided it was time to help clean out my grandparents' house. They had both passed away, and when they had passed away, you know, I had a new baby, my sister had a new job. It just didn't feel like a great time to actually clean out, sell the house, and so I could tell that that was really weighing on my dad's mind. Like, I need to go take care of that house, and so my younger sister and I...
Before you go on, just give us an approximate year and month, if you can.
Yeah, summer of 2019.
Okay, thank you. Continue.
Yeah. So we were working hard. They were Depression era parents, so they didn't just have, you know, 2 pie plates. They had 16 pie plates, and we had a lot to clean out. We were getting up early and going to bed late. We had sold most of their furniture, so we were on like camp pads in bedrooms. We were kind of camping out as we were painting and cleaning and getting ready to put my grandparents' house on the market. And so pretty late in the evening, I had gone to meditate in one of the back bedrooms, and yeah, just take a break. And I stepped into one of the back bedrooms, and I heard my dad's voice elevate, and it didn't sound good. And I thought,
Angry voice, or?
yeah, he was mad, and I thought, what's going on? I sat for a minute to see if anything changed, and I went into the kitchen, and my dad was in my younger sister's face. He was like 2 inches from her face, and he is so mad. He's so angry. And I don't know what the conversation or the disagreement was about, but he was saying, "Fuck you." He just kept repeating that over and over again. And my younger sister...
Anything like that in your life?
No.
Any relationship like that with your dad?
No, I've never felt scared of my dad. I don't think I ever received a spanking from my dad. I think he's been upset, but I have never seen... I was terrified, and I just said, no, like, this has to stop, right? And it was just like, he was in shock of what he was doing too. And my sister didn't respond. It was terrible. It was terrible. And we had been there working so hard, and that was not anything that my sister deserved.
What about any changes in feeling overwhelmed and confused?
That's a big part of where he's at right now. Right? That's just, he is just befuddled, and yeah.
How about preoccupation with details?
Mm-hmm. We talked about that a little bit. I think that's where he's stuck. He can't really see the big picture.
So overwhelmed and confused, you think, is one of the big things that is plaguing him now?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I think I'm about done here. Well, okay, just in conclusion, based on what you've seen since the ski crash, what do you see on the horizon for him? Tell the jury.
Yeah. I hope that he moves on. I hope that we're able to put this very strange chapter behind us. I think we don't always choose the doors that we walk through, but we can choose like how we walk through them. And so I think we have a lot of healing to do, and just that rehab, so that he doesn't feel that he feels empowered to live a good life to the end. He deserves that.
May I have one moment, Judge? Counsel table, thanks. No further questions, Judge.
It's been 1 hour.
Yeah, they can go to cross.
Thank you. So members of the jury, are we good to go 10 or 15 more minutes and then take our lunch break then? Okay, thank you. Let's do that. Mr. Owens. But there is a tissue box here.
You can call me Steve. Can I call you Polly?
Please do.
You and I haven't met, true?
Nice to meet you.
To you too. We're okay, I guess. Thank you. All right. This is hard. This is a hard position you're in. Do you agree? This is not a happy thing that you're having to do.
Correct.
And let me just, I think my nephew, who was once worked with me, took your deposition before. Do you recall that?
Yeah, Wayne Owens.
And we'll talk about that after lunch. He also took the depositions of your two sisters. Have you ever reviewed their transcripts, like actually read them?
No.
How about summaries of them?
More of an oral, like, maybe my sister Shay would say. I did ask this.
And then this is our third day. I'm just wondering, have you watched any of the proceedings the prior 2 days?
No.
One thing that there was a fellow yesterday named Sam Goldstein, who's a neuropsychologist.
Mm-hmm.
He said your dad is obsessed. He's sort of with this. Do you agree?
Oh, yes. I think at some point I had sent my dad a message that said, go for a walk. Please don't let this consume you, because I'm very aware that it has been consuming for him.
And in some sense, the resolution of this trial, whether it's for or against him, will be a good thing for him. Do you agree? Bring some closure for him
For everyone.
and him.
Mhm.
Yes?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, there's an audio, and so we always have to get your answer on the record. Thank you. Jenny is your little sister, right?
Correct.
Is she the one that your dad said F you to?
Correct.
Let me back up one more second. The whole lawsuit stems from, you understand that my client says that your dad plowed into her back. Do you understand at least that allegation?
I'm hearing that now.
And you don't personally know whether your dad did that or not, correct? You weren't present?
I was not skiing with him that day, no.
And when your dad talked to you about bringing the lawsuit, you had no opinion on it? Like, it's your thing. Is that fair?
I wanted to honor his journey. I think that's a big part, that we have autonomy. And so I would support my dad, whichever direction.
Sure, but you didn't say, I think it's a good idea, Dad, that you bring the lawsuit, or
I most definitely did not advise him one way or another.
Yeah.
I think in hindsight now, I would say it's hard.
Actually, I have no pending. Oh, it's hard.
It will be hard, right? I knew Dad.
I want you to see if you kind of preface some of the things I'm going to ask you. So when I hear you say before, he's generally a healthy guy, before very good personality, before very active, good mental health, you understand that to compare what the ski accident did versus old age versus chronic health conditions and everything, I need to know kind of how your dad was on health, personality, mental health, activity level, and those things just before the event. You with me?
Sure.
So a lot of, when I say, for instance, he never seemed angry. He never got that angry with me. Didn't you say that? Like, for instance, his anger toward
That was a new
Jenny.
experience for
Yeah.
me.
But it wasn't for Jenny, was it? Jenny's reported like 10 years of that kind of abuse in the last 10 years of your parents' marriage. True?
I can't speak to Jenny's experience.
Did Jenny, do you know
Did I
that?
witness that towards Jenny? I never witnessed that
Did,
towards
did
Jenny.
Jenny ever tell you, like, your dad used to verbally abuse her and your mom for 10 years?
Jenny and I have a very
Yes.
close relationship.
Just a yes or no,
Your Honor,
please.
I object.
I need a yes or no.
I object, Your Honor. One quick question. There's no foundation. And it's also hearsay.
Your Honor, I need to be able to ask these questions.
Sustained.
Okay. Do you agree that you paint quite a different picture of your dad before than Jenny does?
So my sister Jenny
Yes or no,
has
please?
mental disability.
I just have yes or no questions.
Objection. There's no foundation for this.
Okay,
It's
let me,
also hearsay.
let me just give you a little instruction about, that I've already said in open court, so everybody else is gonna hear this for the second time, but when you're being cross-examined, it's not like a normal conversation. So the lawyer is entitled to ask you questions that limit your answer to yes or no, or I can't answer that yes or no. So those are basically your three choices. If he gives you that kind of a, sometimes he'll ask an open-ended question, but if he's asking the yes or no question, he's entitled to that answer. And then later, Mr. Sykes will be able to clarify if necessary.
Okay.
Sure.
Maybe another way to phrase this
Your Honor, I
too.
make some objections.
I don't have a pending question.
Well, you did.
It's withdrawn. Go ahead and ask a question,
Thanks.
Mr. Owens.
Yesterday, the jury heard through your dad's mental health providers that I'm going to try to read this so I'm not winging it. Your dad was controlling, highly controlling of her long before the ski accident. Have you ever heard that from Jenny?
Your Honor, I object to the form of the question that misstates the evidence.
Overruled, the jury will remember what the evidence was.
Yes or no?
Can you repeat?
Yes. Has Jenny ever, are you close to your sister Jenny?
Very.
Right. You're close to your sister Shay?
Yes.
All right. And always have been?
Yes.
Okay. Jenny didn't talk to your dad for 13 years after getting out of the house after high school. Is that true?
Object, there's no foundation for that.
No.
She can, it's not true?
Your Honor, I
13
object.
years.
Just a minute, there's an
There's
objection.
no foundation.
Will you approach the bench, please?
So the objection is overruled?
Overruled?
Your Honor, I have a continuing objection for the record on this line of questioning.
You may.
Thank you.
I'm gonna tell you things that Jenny has told us under oath, and I want you to comment on them, okay? Is it true that Jenny moved out of her parents' household after high school?
Correct.
All right, and how much older are you than Jenny?
I'm 6 years older.
And how many years had you moved out of the house before Jenny moved out of the house?
So I moved out at 18, so she would have been 12. So she had 6 years at home without me.
Okay, and and would you describe your parents' marriage as a good marriage when you left 6 years before their?
They were in the middle of a divorce, and not an amiable one.
And his second divorce wasn't amicable either, was it?
Objection, no foundation.
Overruled?
She can always say, I don't know the answer. So when he says foundation, if you don't know the answer, rather than hear this objection all the time, you can just say, I don't know.
I don't know.
Judge, there's one judge in the courtroom, and it's not Judge Owens, so I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't try to explain to the witness what things mean.
That's, I am not a judge.
I think each questioner can give some ground rules to the witness, and I think it was appropriate, so.
Was the second marriage amicable?
I don't know.
Don't you really? You have no idea if your dad's second marriage parted peacefully or not peacefully?
I don't know.
Well, what's your impression? Like, what do you know? Like, the divorce went smoothly or it didn't go smoothly?
I know that they're friends today.
Okay, so your answer?
It seems like they've been able to continue a friendship anyway.
The jury heard evidence yesterday by Mr. Goldstein, Dr. Goldstein, that these words described your father before the ski accident, and I want you to tell me just if you observed this. He was controlling.
No.
He relentlessly tried to mold.
All people? Specific people?
Jenny,
I would say, yes, he did try to mold Jenny.
in a negative way.
I think he would say he was trying to be a positive influence.
I asked for your impression. Did you believe that's a positive thing?
I have no opinion on that.
Jenny has a pretty strong opinion on that, doesn't she?
She does.
That it was in an awful, unhealthy way. Is that her opinion?
Are those words she used in her deposition?
Just ask.
Oh, go ahead.
I've been told not to read the deposition, so I'm just asking you to comment. Jenny believes it was an awful, unhealthy way. Do you agree?
No.
You think Jenny would say, by the way, let me ask about Jenny for a minute.
Yeah.
Have you talked to Jenny about this trial?
She knew I was coming. Mm-hmm.
Jenny committed in writing to attend this trial, and then,
I object, Your Honor, this is totally.
let me finish my question, and then pulled out.
Sustained as to relevance.
Thank you.
The jury should disregard the question.
Do you know if Jenny's planning to attend this trial?
To answer that.
Yes, if you know.
Oh, she is not planning on attending.
Do you know that there was a point in time when she committed to attend this trial?
Overruled.
Are you
I
aware?
was not aware.
Or that she was planning to attend the trial?
The question's been asked and answered, so there's not relevance to any more questions along this line.
Did you or anyone you know attempt to dissuade her from attending this trial?
No, she felt like it would be a financial hardship. I said I would be happy to pay for her airplane ticket if she wanted to come.
I did too. Do you know that?
That's totally irrelevant.
I think the witness opened it up, so.
Do you know that I did? I offered to pay too.
No, I did not know.
So did you weigh in on that, Jenny? I don't think it's good for you to attend the trial.
No, not at all. I honor people's journey, and so that's entirely up to her.
Do you,
Lunch yet?
2 minutes?
Okay, go ahead.
Do you believe with this statement, with Jenny, your dad was constantly overstepping her boundaries?
Jack, no foundation.
Overruled, there's a standing objection on that.
Standing objection. Yes or no?
Again, repeat.
He was constantly overstepping the boundaries she set. Agree or disagree?
Agree.
He would be frequently frustrated if his expectations were not met.
Agree.
He had a very strong emphasis on discipline.
With Jenny?
Sure.
Agree.
He had very high demands and would be very frustrated if his expectations were not met.
Disagree.
Okay, and to be clear, we're all talking about pre-ski collision, true?
Correct.
All right. That he was domineering to Jenny and your mother.
Disagree.
Okay, I'm going to split those because that was a compound question, we call it. So as to Jenny, was he domineering and emotionally and verbally abusive to her prior to the ski collision?
Disagree.
So she made that up. She's testified under oath. She made that up?
It's her experience. So
I want
you're
the
asking
truth.
my opinion, and I think you have her experience.
Is she lying? I mean,
Objection, Your Honor, that's an improper
Are you
question.
saying there's one
Just a
truth?
second.
Yeah, just a second.
on certain facts, there.
Counsel, have
Sure.
an objection. What's the
Yeah,
objection?
Your Honor, I don't think he can ask if someone else is lying. He doesn't know that. It's an improper question.
This is her sister, Your
I
Honor,
mean,
who
he
she's
can ask her
very
what the
close
facts-
to.
just a minute, fellas. He can ask her what the facts are, you know, and the jury can make up its own mind, but he shouldn't be concluding for someone that's not here whether she's telling the truth or not. It's improper.
I mean, under certain circumstances, a lay witness can offer an opinion. I don't think I've heard enough foundation for that opinion, so sustained.
Thank you.
So if Jenny says that your father was domineering, do you agree or disagree prior to the ski accident?
Disagree.
And if she so testifies, and we're going to read part of her transcript into the record, if she so testifies, that is not true. He was not domineering. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying he was not domineering.
So if Jenny says he was,
That is her testimony.
and you would disbelieve it.
My testimony would say he was not domineering.
Would you
her testimony is that he was.
Right. So they can both be true?
Objection argumentative.
Overruled.
So depending on people's mental capabilities and disabilities, sometimes we experience events differently.
Is it possible that, for instance, your dad wasn't domineering with you, but he was with Jenny?
I think it is possible. I wasn't home.
Sure.
I was in college for many of those years.
Your dad was verbally abusive to Jenny before the ski accident. Agree or disagree?
Disagree.
Your dad was emotionally and verbally abusive to your mother before the ski accident. Agree or disagree?
I think he could have done better, but I wouldn't call it domineering and abusive, no.
Have you known your dad to go up and, are you aware that he went up and just punched a guy once?
I was not aware of that.
You've never heard that your dad punched your mother's, you've never heard that?
No, sir.
That your dad believed your mother was having an affair and went and punched the guy out? You don't know this?
I don't know that.
Okay. It's probably a good time to break. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, we'll break now, or recess now for lunch, returning at 1:30. All right, so we're recessed until 1:30. Is there any need for the court to come back sooner?
5 minutes sooner. On these character type questions, I want to kind of preview some things because rather than get objections every 3 questions. So I do.
Let's come 15 minutes early then. So 1:15.
1:15.
Thank you.
Thank you.